Hi, my name is Kuchio from CITAM ChurchOnline. Have you ever been frustrated having to wait? Wait for a phone call, wait for an email, wait for an answer to your proposition, wait for a child, wait for a job. Waiting can be very, very frustrating. But today, let's talk about the fullness of time. The fullness of time. Could it be that the reason why at times we are very frustrated having to wait is because of our limited understanding of the concept of time? Could it be that one of the reasons why we get so frustrated having to wait for a phone call, having to wait for an email, having to wait for a baby, having to wait for a job to come through is because of our limited understanding of the concept of time? You see, the ancient Greeks had two words for time. The first word was chronos, and the second word was kairos. Chronos refers to sequential time. Time as we know it, in terms of minutes, days, weeks, months. Chronos, that is where we draw our word chronometer from, chronos. But the second word that the ancient Greeks had was the word kairos. Kairos. And kairos speaks of the opportune time or the perfect time. So could it be that the reason why we are frustrated at times having to wait is because we do not have a full appreciation of time in terms of chronos and kairos? Now, there are times when the kairos moment might not align itself with the chronos moment. Let me explain. You probably got married and you decided after 2 years you're going to get a baby according to your sequential timing, according to chronos. And you counted the weeks, you counted the years. But after 2 years, nothing happened. 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. And you were so frustrated, wondering, I thought I had planned, I had timed this according to your calendar. Don't be frustrated because the miracle of a baby probably is not in line with your chronos time, but is in line with the kairos time, God's timing. So it's important for us to appreciate that God works both in chronos and kairos. Chronos and kairos. Galatians 4:4 tells us this, that when the fullness of time came, God sent forth his Son to be born under the law, that he may redeem those under the law and grant us adoption as sons. Jesus Christ was born in the fullness of time. That word time in Galatians 4:4 does not refer to chronos, it refers to kairos. It is very interesting that before Jesus Christ's birth, God was working behind the scenes. What was he doing? God was working amongst the Romans. God used the Romans to build an enviable, a world-class road network that by the time Jesus Christ comes on earth, his ministry would have maximum impact because of the road networks that would have been built by the Romans. God was at work amongst the Jews. Amongst the Jews, there was an expectation of the Messiah. There was this expectation of a Messiah. And when it had hit fever pitch, Christ was revealed. Christ is born at a time when the expectation of the Messiah is high. So God was at work amongst the Jews as well. What about the Greeks? God was at work amongst the Greeks because the Greeks gave the world a universal language. So that by the time Christ is born and he comes and ministers, the gospel goes far and wide because there is one universal language. So the birth of Christ happened according to God's kairos moment, so that He is born and he works and ministers for 3.5 years. And in those 3.5 years, his ministry had maximum impact. Why? Because it happened in the fullness of time, the Kairos moment. It is important to note that between the Old Testament and the New Testament, between Malachi and Matthew, is a long period of time, 400 years, which theologians call a period of silence. Why a period of silence? No noteworthy prophecy was given, no noteworthy miracle is recorded. It was simply silent. And it would have been easy for someone to say, this story of God ended with Malachi. But God was working behind the scenes to prepare the ground for the coming of Jesus Christ. I came to encourage somebody here that God works in both Chronos and in Kairos. There are times probably you planned to have a baby within 2 years and it happened. God allowed it to happen. There are times you plan to get a job as soon as you graduate from university and it happened. But for some of us, you planned to get a job and you walked and tarmac for 5 years, then got a job. For some of us, we were desiring to be CEOs after graduating from the university, or you had said, when I hit 30, I'll be a CEO. And that didn't quite work. Only when you get to your 40s is when God allows you to be a CEO. So God works both in Chronos and in Kairos. Mine is to encourage you. Find out what is God's plan for your life. What is God's plan for your situation? That will keep you from frustration, because God works both in Chronos and in Kairos. What is important is to know God's will for you. So you desire a job, seek God about his will for you. You desire a child, seek God's will concerning you. You desire a spouse, seek God's will concerning you. You desire a promotion at work, seek God's will concerning you. After you've sought God's will concerning your situation, please relax, because in the fullness of time, it will come to pass. You know, between the intervening period, between Malachi and Matthew, can be a very challenging period of time. Between the time you prayed and the answer came, between the amen and the answer, can be a very confusing time. The most important thing is this: align yourself with God's will, because God's will could happen in the Chronos or in the Kairos. But you know what? If God's will happens in the Chronos, that is God's perfect timing for you. That is God's Kairos moment for you. So mine is to encourage you that for as long as you are a child of God, for as long as you have a relationship with God, you can rest assured that nothing will happen to you outside God's timing. When you're a child of God, when an event comes to pass in your life, you can celebrate it as God's Kairos moment, God's perfect timing. That presupposes that you should not try to help God. I've heard it said that God helps those who help themselves. That is not true. God helps those who trust him. So don't try to help God. Don't try to go ahead of God. Don't go behind God. Walk in step with God, because God has a perfect timing for you. And when he answers, all and sundry will know this was God's perfect timing for you. You know, I was reading the other day some very interesting write-up of this person who said that some of us were longing to have bought our first house in your 30s, and it never quite happened. And you found that you worked into your 40s, into your 50s, that's when you were able to own your first house. Some of us desired to get married in our 20s. It never quite happened. Maybe you got married in your 40s, or maybe you're still waiting to get married. Some of you desire to be a CEO in your 30s, and maybe it hasn't happened, or it happened maybe in your 40s, in your 50s. It is very important to notice and to appreciate that provided your life is surrendered into God's hands, it really doesn't matter whether it happens in your 20s, in your 30s, in your 40s, because God is concerned about fulfilling His will in your life. When His will comes to pass in your life, time ceases to be the issue. And that way, you will be able to manage feelings of frustration. God's perfect timing. So please relax, because when you're in the will, when you're operating in God's will, He answers according to His perfect timing for you. So you don't have any reason to be scared or frustrated, because God has His will in place, and it shall come to pass in His time. The Lord bless you richly. Have a great week ahead of you. My name is Patrick Kuchio from CITAM ChurchOnline. Please keep in touch with us. We'd like to know what God is doing in your life and through you as you surrender to His perfect timing, the Kairos moment for God for you. God bless you.